Good day everyone, I'm David, the moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, which is Independent Contractor or Employee, how to avoid misclassifying your workers. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today, Mark Schwartz. Mark Schwartz is an employment tax specialist with over 25 years of payroll tax experience. He incorporates his experience with the laws and regulations, giving audiences a leg up on applying the knowledge to their business. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, and welcome everybody to today's audio conference on independent contractor. This is a very important topic, an independent contractor and who couldn't. So the Department of Labor took those two viewpoints, one very strict and that most workers were going to be employees versus it can be a lot more up to the employer given certain circumstances. And they came up with something that's essentially in the middle. And we will talk about that in detail. So our learning objectives for today. We'll talk about some misclassification facts. All right. And we'll talk about also statutory employees, what that former IRS three-part test was, or the ABC test. Okay. Then we'll talk about exposure for the average business. We'll talk about ancillary issues, electronic filing and TIN matching systems, backup withholding, and current cases. The IRS claims it loses billions of dollars each year in employment and income taxes due to improper classification. Most income gets reported to the IRS by the people who provide you the income. If you treat all of them as independent contractors, you want to take a look and make sure that they fit the regulation. You want to consider putting them on payroll, and the advice would be to just start putting them on payroll ASAP. You're going to pay attention to the facts of your relationship with the worker that point to employment. All right. And again, it's not just the IRS. It's not just the state payroll taxing agencies. That's the EDD in California that I used to work for. But workers' compensation and departments of labor, burden of proof is yours like it is with business, right? You make a decision. You're going to have to show why you made it, and it's subject to scrutiny by the regulatory authority, right? That's where you record the payments for independent contractors. Now, that's why the NEC was invented, was to separate your payments to independent contractors from the 1099 MISC, right? That happened in 2020, right? And it references the Fair Labor Standards Act, upon which all employment-related materials started. So much comes from the Fair Labor Standards Act: overtime, minimum wage, and also some of the stuff about what makes an independent contract. One of the largest complaints from the employer community is that it's still confusing, and they ask, does it really have to be? The more those workers exhibit the same stuff you have as your own business, then the more likely you're able to classify them as an independent contractor. So those were the core factors that came out of the final rule. Final rule also provides broader discussion of how scheduling, remote supervision, price setting, and the ability to work for others should be considered under the control factor. Ability, folks. So keep that in mind. If it's clear that they have the right to do these things, even if they don't do it, it's the right to do them that matters. You should never have to train an independent contractor. If you do, that's a strong indication for employment. No, I'm sorry. The IRS test is a common law test. I'm sorry about that mistake. The states use the ABC test. The more of those signs your independent contractor has, the safer you are in keeping them an independent contractor. In sections that follow, the department is providing a detailed analysis about the application of each factor. Right? So any contract with an independent contractor that pays a simple hourly rate, whether the worker accepts or declines jobs or chooses the order and or time in which the jobs are performed. The more they do that, the more they're independent. All right. So the second factor, they went in detail, investments by the worker and the potential employer. If the investments are capital or entrepreneurial in nature, in other words, if what they have to invest to do your job is for more than just your job, if it helps them, enhances their ability to be in business for themselves, that's what points to independent contractor. Degree of permanence of the work relationship. Again, if they're working for you indefinitely, much like employees do until you don't need them anymore, then that points towards employment. Independent contractors often rely on repeat business. There are very few scenarios I can think of where you don't want some control over the work they do. So an overview of this control factor. The appropriate focus for this factor must be on the employer's control over the worker and not the worker's control over the work. Forms of control that you use just because you think it's better business and you force them on the independent contractor, you're weighing in favor of employment. Supervision. Okay? You supervise employees. Employees go wrong, you generally have a meeting with the boss. If you are regularly looking at the work done by your independent contractors, you're treating them more like an employee. If you use technology to supervise, it's the same thing as having a human supervise it. Many industries, occupations, or business sectors set prices and rates for goods or services in ways that are unique. You're just saying, look, if you agree to work for us, you got to get the work done by this kind of time. That is okay in terms of keeping them an independent contractor. So that's a clear-cut distinction between what would make an employee versus an independent contractor. Extent to which the work performed is an integral part of the potential employer's business. And the more you have to train them on these skills, the more you have an employee. Using such skills to grow or expand their work is a prime example of business-like initiative. So those are all the factors that come out of the final rule and replace the 2021 rule. Essentially, the more signs of them being in business for themselves, the safer you are in determining them to be an independent contractor. I talked about statutory employees. Again, officers of C corporations are employees, and sometimes S corporations, it depends. The IRS three-factor test that the DOL final rule made or changed. And state determinations, far more strict in a lot of states, look at this more strictly than the federal government does. In other words, it's not mandated that they accept it. Document, document, document. And don't have your own written contract, all right? If you use a lot of independent contractors, the more you need to pay attention to this stuff. Starting next year, it'll be mandated, and you can have penalty and interest for not doing so. Publication 1220 by the IRS, if you need more on that. You get a W-9 for your independent contractor. You want to make sure they are who they say they are. The TIN online matching system will do that for you. Google that, and it's like an I-9 e-filing. More on that are in these slides if you want to read them. All right, I already talked about the Uber and Lyft cases.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. All right, so what I want to do before I let you guys go is to just reiterate what the core factors are. All right, thank you. Thanks for attending today's webinar.
Thank you, Mark. That does conclude the session for today. Thank you, everyone, for participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day ahead.